In this video, I will focus on using the Munsell Big Color Chipbook, mixing neutral grays, creating a range of reds, transferring the drawing, and painting the parrot. Hi, I'm Shauna Lampi-Legaree. Welcome to this week's video. The reference shot being used is my own image from Taronga Zoo in Sydney, Australia. I went several times during our trip. Here's the original image without any editing at all. The second image is made lighter so that I could see the details that were hiding in the dark areas. What attracted me to paint this image is the very classic red-green complementary combination. I love the challenge of creating suitable reds for on the ECLECTUS Parrot. She has a high chroma head and those low chroma dark wings. I was really attracted to how the palm leaves bend away from the bird. Though I did like the background, I chose to simplify it and take it out in the sketchbook. This is a simple, graphically striking image. I needed more information before I started to paint because I really have never spent time with ECLECTUS parrots. To that end, I popped over to the royalty-free website, Pixabay. This photo helped clarify a couple of things. First, that the wings of the ECLECTUS parrot are really a dark low chroma red, and second, that there was a lot more blue over the shoulder, and I noticed the tips of the folded wings were blue. Third, the tail feathers go from a darker red closer to the body to a lighter orange-yellow combination at the feathers' tips. I don't see the tail feathers at the same angle, but it's good information to have. This would be actually a great image to work from because both the male and the female pair are in the same image and the lighting is interesting. Pixabay is a royalty-free website. Notice the number of blue primary wing feathers on the female. I also decided to look at unsplash.com. Here I have my big book of Munsell color chips. Look at all those lovely colors. I'm pulling out a range of red charts from orange to red purple. Let's take a look and see what we have here. We're going to start with the red purples, 5 RP, 7.5 RP, 10 RP, 2.5 red, 5 R, 7.5 red, 10 red, 2.5 YR, which is yellow red, and 5 YR. Notice that the red is changing from having more blue towards more yellow. As I go through these red charts, I'm comparing my images to the color chips. Let's take a closer look at the 5YR and the 2.5YR pages, also known as orange. Notice that there is a subtle shift from 5YR, which has more yellow in it, than the 2.5YR, which is just a touch more red in the hue. The next two hue charts we're looking at, 10R and 7.5R. The shift away from yellow towards red is more pronounced. The 7.5R chart is exactly where Golden's cadmium red light falls in the Munsell color system. I do see some of the ECLECTUS parrot colors here in this range on this 7.5R color chart. Here are the hue charts, 5R and 2.5R. Golden's cadmium red medium hue is represented by the 5R chart. There's a lot of potential reds for the parrot in the 5R color chart. I did my own test to see if I understood where the various paints would appear on the Munsell hue color chart system. Then I confirmed my results with the Golden Munsell information paint list that they have on their site. I was pretty much spot on. Now onto the red purples. Here is the hues 10 RP and 7.5 RP. Immediately there is more blue in this red. And here I bring in 2.5R and you can see the shift going towards the blue. This is 5 RP. I am going to add Alizarin Crimson Permanent onto my palette. To the main hue chart that represents the ECLECTUS parrot best of all, hue 5R, which is the cadmium red medium chart. I thought it would be helpful to place the image of the ECLECTUS parrot on the top left next to the chart. Let's explore the 3 different characteristics of our paint colors that we have. The first attribute that we're going to look at is hue, which in this case is red. Second is value. Simply put how light or dark the color is. The value range on this hue chart goes from value 9 to value 2. The third quality is chroma. Chroma is about how intense the color is or how grayed down it is. Reds, as a general group, tend to be very chromatic. Now, we can go from the far right position of chroma 14, which is the paint straight out of the tube. Watch the chroma change. 12, 10, 8, 6, 4, 2. The chroma 2 chip is fairly much gray. Here I bring in the 10R chart, which goes to chroma 16, and that is the highest chroma level on these Munsell charts. Other colors, yellow, yellow reds, oranges, and this red can be found up to chroma 16. This explains why new artists can struggle with these really intense colors. To drop the chroma from 14 down to 2, we will add a neutral gray. Here is the 5R chart, chroma 1 chip. Look how the chroma 2 chip seems less gray in comparison. The chroma 1 chip looks really gray. That is until I put a neutral gray chip next to it. All of a sudden you can see a hint of red in the chroma 1 chip. This just reminds us how we see and understand color is really all about what colors are next to each other. To recap, there are 3 color characteristics: hue, value, and chroma. It is the subtle nature of chroma and value management that helps us to create form in our paintings. Time to choose the chips that I feel best represent the reds on the ECLECTUS Parrot. One thing I do know is that I won't be using the paint straight out of the tube. Lowering the chroma a small amount makes all of the difference. Here are some of the color chips that represent the reds in the middle range of the bird. Value 4, chroma 10, and 12. And now to step down, I'm going to the value 3 range, chroma 8, 6, and 4. Value 2 is the darkest parts of the bird, chroma 4 and 6. As I mentioned before, I'm planning to add some of the hue 7.5R cadmium red light onto my palette. I see some of these colors on the top of the head and the tail feathers. I've taken 2 color chips from 7.5R chart, value 6, chroma 10, and value 5, chroma 12. I want to add in some cadmium orange for 2 reasons. One, it's a lighter value than cadmium red light or medium, and that will be helpful. Secondly, it will help with the light being reflected off the top of the head, which seems to be more towards the yellow. So that's color hue chart 2.5 YR, yellow red, which is Golden's cadmium orange. We don't want to use full chroma orange. Using the value 6 chroma 12 will do the trick. The last paint color to add for the ECLECTUS Parrot for all of the red area is cadmium yellow medium of the hue chart 5Y, which is 5 yellow. It is a warm yellow that has a tiny bit of red in it, which means it will play really well with all the other colors that I'm working with. It is a value 8 out of the tube. This is going to be helpful when we're going to mix a lighter value in reds. More on that soon. Here is the palette page to keep the chips from being damaged or lost. 5Y, value 8, chroma 14, 2.5 YR, value 6, chroma 12, 7.5R, value 6, chroma 10, value 5, chroma 12, and 5R, value 4, chroma 10 and 12, value 3, chroma 4, 6, and 8, value 2, chroma 4, and 6. The 5R color chips kind of line up to being a light dark, middle dark, and a dark dark. Those subtle value shifts create the illusion of form on the shadow side of the bird. I have a video that explains how to model form. There is a link below for the blog post on this topic as well. onto the supplies that I will paint with. I like these little ceramic plates. I have a number of them, and for this project I will use 3, one for the red, one for neutralized gray, and the last one for greens. I find it really helpful to keep the colors separated and contained. I use 2 of these kind of larger plastic containers to hold my water. It is much easier to keep your brushes clean if you have 2 containers to work with. Here is the range of brushes that I will use when I am painting. We have 2 different sizes of pointed rounds. I have a 1/4 inch flat. I pulled out the luscious watercolor brushes that hold a lot of juicy paint. I found them rather perfect on the second pass. The next tool I'm going to use is this little spritzer bottle that I buy at the art store. Not all water bottles are made finely mist. This is a must-have tool. A paint tube squeezer, which makes sure that I can get all the paint I can out of those tubes that I purchase. And here is a very well-loved palette knife, and I'll use that for mixing the neutralized grays. I prefer the blue shop towels to work with. They are lint-free and are perfect for drying my brush. I fold it up and have it close by. This way I can manage the water on my brushes and will even touch my brush to it to make sure I've just the right amount of paint in the brush. Let's look at the colors that will be on my full palette. I've only made the decisions about the reds so far. The first set of colors is ivory black, raw umber, and white for making my neutralized gray value strength. Here are cadmium red medium, cadmium red light, permanent alizarin crimson, cadmium orange, cadmium yellow light. Obviously cadmium colors are popular today. And there is blue on the bird, and I've chosen to use cobalt blue and ultramarine blue. The last addition to my palette is Viridian green. I'm going to use raw umber and cadmium yellow medium as well as the neutralized gray to help manage the green. Time to make our neutralized gray. We're going to take the ivory black, raw umber, and white. I will start by mixing black and raw umber together. I find it really different working with gouache compared to acrylic for mixing. The mixture is so dark that I need to test it out with a little bit of white. Because I've been working this way for a number of years, I can see that the mixture is not neutralized enough yet. Add in a bunch more raw umber, test it again, and there we are, neutral gray. Here I take the pure black and add a bit of white just to show the difference between the 3 different gray mixtures. The far left one is quite blue, that's straight out of the tube, black and white. The middle mixture is a little less blue, and the third one on the far right has been made neutral. Let's mix a range of values to create the string to work with. To start off, I just add white paint to make a lighter value. Then I add more dark paint for each value step. I'm not making all 9 steps. I'm focusing in on 4 or 5 mixtures. My intent is to give myself a range that I can work from, and then I can tweak as I need to. Here is the final neutral grays. I want to figure out the value that I've created of these mixtures. I will do that simply by comparing it against the neutral gray testing strip that was created with the golden acrylic paint. This comparison gives me 2 pieces of information. 1, that the gray is neutral enough, and 2, the value of each of the mixtures. As I put them on the strip, immediately I realized that I didn't have a light enough mixture. That's easy to rectify by using a lot of white and a small amount of neutral gray. Moving the palette aside, here is the value strip. I have created value 2, value 3, 4, 5, 6, and value 8. It gives me a solid range of values to work from as I'm lowering the chroma on the paints. I want to share with you the red palette. The main colors are cadmium yellow medium, cadmium orange, cadmium red light, cadmium red medium, and alizarin crimson permanent. Notice that the value of the paint goes from the lightest, which is the yellow, to the darkest, which is alizarin crimson. I add a bit of Viridian green on this palette as well. And as always, white. Using that neutralized gray value strip, I want to take a few minutes to figure out the value of each of the paints. A big challenge is that red paints can be rather dark straight out of the tube. So let's figure out the values that we're dealing with. Moving from the darkest to the lightest, we have alizarin crimson permanent is a value 2, cadmium red medium is a value 4, cadmium red light is a value 5, cadmium orange is a value 7, cadmium yellow medium is a value 8. How can we take cadmium red medium from a value 4 to a value 7 and still keep it within the red family? The first mixture I'm going to create here is a neutralized yellow. Our intent is to take that high chroma color, which is at value 8, and only changing the chroma but not the value. It's actually quite simple. We add a value 8 neutralized gray. Notice that I take the excess paint off the brush on the lower part of the palette. Careful not to overdo it. This makes the yellow look more realistic, and it's such an easy way to work. Here is the second darkest value of red, cadmium red medium. As I add white to this paint, it turns into a warm pink color. That is not going to be really helpful on this parrot, even though it does lighten the value. I feel like avoiding making pink when creating a lighter value with red is a solid goal. Unless, of course, pink is your intent, then go for it. That is easy to manifest by simply adding white to the red paint. In the second mixture, I will start with cadmium red medium, but I will take some of the cadmium yellow medium to mix into white paint. I will use this to create a lighter value. The addition of yellow into the white helps manage the value shift much better. You don't get a pink, but you create a color that is expected in the red group. I add in extra of the cadmium yellow medium, but that makes the mixture far too orange. Bring back in a little bit more red and then add that white-yellow mixture. And with each addition of the white-yellow mixture, I'm bringing up the value. Now, if I need just to bump the value a half a step, it's easy to do. I can mix in cadmium red medium with the lighter value cadmium red light. And then I can bring the chroma down on this very intense red by adding a neutralized gray of the same value. Immediately, the red doesn't look as brash or as powerful. Let's take more of that cadmium red medium and change the chroma in two different ways. First, by adding a neutral gray at a value 4. It becomes a very rich, low chroma red. I'm placing a bit of the pure cadmium red medium right there so that we can compare the two. Now I start with the same red, but using that complementary color combination. I'm sure you've heard that you can add green in to neutralize red, which is true. So I'm going to add the Viridian green. The color mixture looks very similar, but I know from experience that it is far more difficult to manage the red that has been altered with the high chroma green. So let's do a quick recap. I added in a small amount of cadmium yellow medium to the white. This allows me to increase the value of cadmium red medium and still keep that color looking like it belongs in the red family. Here I'm using cadmium orange, which is a lighter value paint, to bring the value of the cad red medium up. I can bring it from a value 4 to either value 5 or 6 with this paint combination. The resulting color mixture is very intense, but it keeps it in the same color family and is simple to drop the chroma with a neutral gray. I got some cute stickers of crimson rosella and zebra finches when I was in Australia. It seemed like the perfect way to decorate the front of this great Australian bird adventure book. Now it's time to transfer the drawing. I'm far more comfortable drawing a grid and making sure that the bird fits exactly in my book. Here is my simple transfer method. I take the image, placing the drawing side outwards on the window, and then I use a 2B pencil to cover each line that I want to transfer. Place the drawing on your page, and then use a blue pen to transfer the image. It makes it easier to see which of the black lines I've already transferred. You can use either red, green, or purple pen too. I appreciate that this method transfers very lightly on the page. I realized that I missed a few areas and I wasn't happy with the eye placement. By using a 2H pencil, which is a hard lead, I made the corrections in light lines. And this gives me enough information to work from. I did have the basic shapes in, but now I'm just putting in some detail. Here we go, on to the painting. At this point, I'm thinking like watercolor, where the underlayers are yellows and oranges, and then I would paint transparently over top. That allows the light to glow through the layers. Unfortunately, gouache doesn't actually work that way. I use this 1/4 inch flat throughout the first painting pass. I'm not worried about it looking kind of choppy. I just am getting the values that I'm seeing in place as accurately as possible. There is that blue, darker around the side and lighter value at the top. Beginning to work on the maxilla, which is the name for the top part of the beak. The iris of the bird is a low chroma pale yellow. The darkest part of the beak is the gap between the maxilla and the bottom mandible. This will be the place to put the value to. Now that the maxilla is dried enough, I can come and finish the first pass. I like how the light is just at the top edge of the beak. Using the pointed round brush, I begin to place the lower mandible in. Now that the iris color is dry, I can place the pupil in. There's still a lot of work to be done on the eye yet. I began to put on the second layer. I used a slightly damp round brush to soften the edges of paint before I actually moved on to the wing area. I have the darker lower chroma red at the bottom of the wing where there's not much light. As I build to the top of the wing, I bring in more chromatic lighter values of red. The form is starting to be seen. I painted this wing in before I made the reference image lighter. I was missing some information because the image was so dark. Thankfully, with gouache, I can go back and correct that area. It is helpful to work on the subtle shifts of chroma and value when doing the red wing. You can see that I used the white-yellow mixture to bring the value up of the red. Here we are back to the blues before jumping over to the tail feathers. I can see that there's more yellow in this area. Now, the only part of the blue primary feather wings that we see is when the wings are folded are these tips of blue. Using a size 2 pointed round, I'm filling in this tiny area. The flank and undertail covers are a higher chroma red than the wings. And here we go on to the green. I chose to add the following paints to my green palette: Viridian green, cadmium yellow medium, white, and raw umber, which is a low chroma yellow, and neutral grays in various values. One of the big challenges with green is that we paint it too chromatic. Sometimes we don't understand how to modify it. Viridian is on the 5BG blue-green Munsell color chart at a value 2 chroma 6. By using this combination of paints in various mixtures and values, this will help create a more realistic looking plant. I'm trying to capture the gentle changes of light on each of the palm leaves. I am working in a Stillman Byrne Beta Series mixed media sketchbook. I'm adding cadmium yellow medium in to create variety. Remember that the darker the value the paint you have, the easier it will be to make a dark value paint mixture. Here is the back foot. Then I move to the front foot, which is tucked in and hiding underneath the leaves. The rest of the front leg is buried under the wing. I pick up one of my good watercolor brushes. It can hold a lot of water and paint. This means I will get far better coverage as I paint. Oh, and let there be light. I start on the head as I choose to get the face completed before I move on to the body. Here is a small round brush to soften the edges of paint. It's very slightly damp. Now to bring in the pointed round synthetic brush. The feathers under the beak and the neck are slightly fluffed up. Still using that pointed round, I am now making corrections to the shapes under the wings that I discovered when I made that reference image lighter. Let's move back to the face. Taking a bit of the value 6 gray, I'm creating the area around the eye. Being careful not to touch the damp paint, I add in more of that pale yellow tone of the iris color. I will come back to the pupil in due time. I use just a tiny bit of raw umber to darken that pale yellow iris color. This helps create the form of the round eye. Now with a pointed round, I'm bringing in some brighter reds that I will soften the edges with another brush. This gives some texture to the feathers on the face. The eye is dried enough for me to step back in and correct the pupil shape. Back to the maxilla part of the beak. I put the range of values on, then I get a clean round brush and softly move the paint around. I do a lot of that. Back to the eye to add in the first of the highlights and to create some subtle value shifts and textures around the eye area. I noticed that there are areas on the pupil that has lighter areas because of being round. Each little addition brings the eye area to a final finish. Working on the slight value shifts on the maxilla, using a damp brush to move the paint to where I want it to go. The nostril area is quite a deep value. And then there was this dark path from the beak leading towards the eye. Soften the edge of that paint. I'm working on the bottom mandible, building up the various slight value shifts resulting from the way the light distributes over the beak, using very little paint and softening and moving the paint around. It was a good decision to move to this watercolor brush. I had been struggling with these little white areas, but this brush holds so much more paint and the specks were covered over with ease. Onto the wings, and we're adding some light areas. I'm loving how this female ECLECTUS parrot is turning out so far. I'm adding a very dark red area under the wings, as well as placing a lighter value red on the wings to push the wing forward a bit. I continue to build up the wings. Here is the final tweaks on the face. It just needs to be a little bit lighter, softening the paint out with a damp brush. I'm going to pop through these green leaves. My focus for this video was the beautiful red ECLECTUS Parrot. I will be using each of the different brushes to create lines and textures of the leaves. Here I'm using nearly white paint to place the variegated look on the leaves. I didn't find that it worked very well. Just a bit lighter on the cheek. Placing the striations back on the leaves near the end of the process isn't as easy with gouache. It's much easier with acrylic. We are getting there, nearly to the point of being finished. If you stayed to the end, thank you so much for watching.